So, when we hear about wildfires, I think most of us imagine climate and forests, maybe some firefighters bravely battling the flames. But there's so much more happening beneath the surface, right?
Absolutely, and what's striking is that wildfires aren't just about weather or ecology. They become deeply political events, where questions of blame, responsibility, and even national identity get stirred up. Especially in places like Greece, the aftermath of a fire can be almost as heated as the fire itself.
That makes me wonder, how did wildfires in Greece, and especially the Evros wildfire, become the center of all this blame shifting and finger-pointing?
Well, the Evros wildfire in 2023, which was actually the largest in European history, ended up exposing a tangled web of narratives. Politicians, media, and the public seized on it not just as a disaster, but as a moment to argue over causes and culprits. It's not just about the fire, it's about what the fire represents to different groups.
It's wild, no pun intended, how a single event can become so loaded with meaning. That actually reminds me. The media seems to play a huge role in how these meanings get shaped. What's going on there?
Media outlets are really the stage managers in these disasters. They decide which stories get told, who gets quoted, and what kinds of explanations the public even hears. In Greece, the media tends to amplify certain narratives, sometimes blaming migrants, sometimes blaming the government, sometimes focusing on climate change.
I saw that in the analysis, some articles didn't blame anyone, just reported the facts, while others dove headfirst into assigning responsibility. How do those different frames affect how people think about the fire?
It's huge. When media outlets highlight, say, government mismanagement or accuse specific groups, it can shift public anger or sympathy. For example, after the Evros fire, some news stories zeroed in on migrants, not just reporting arrests, but actively fueling suspicion or even open hostility. That narrative didn't pop up in a vacuum, it was carefully shaped.
It sounds like these frames do more than just inform, they influence who the public sees as the bad guy. Funny you say that, because I noticed the same kind of thing with climate change coverage. Sometimes it's presented as this faceless global villain, which feels almost too big to grasp.
Right, and when blame gets pinned on something as huge as climate change, it can actually let local actors off the hook. Media framing can either open up real conversations about solutions, or, sadly, allow for scapegoating and missed opportunities.
Let's get into those blame narratives, because what really stood out were the different groups singled out as responsible. Migrants seem to get the harshest treatment in a lot of stories.
That's true, and it's troubling. In the Evros case, some right-wing politicians and certain media outlets went as far as calling migrants arsonists or even dangerous invaders. You'd see headlines painting them as kamikazes or dogs, absolutely inflammatory language. The result? A moral panic that sometimes led to citizens taking matters into their own hands.
But not every outlet followed that script, right? There were also narratives blaming the government, especially from opposition papers or progressive voices.
Exactly. The anti-government frame focused on years of mismanagement, lack of fire prevention, and slow emergency response. In fact, some articles highlighted how ordinary citizens and firefighters had to step up and save entire villages themselves, turning frustration into a kind of grassroots heroism.
It's interesting how climate change also enters the picture. Some articles pointed to rising temperatures and drought as the real culprits, while others even suggested foreign governments or spy games. It's almost like every crisis becomes a mirror for society's deepest anxieties.
You're completely right. It shows how disasters can be reshaped to fit political goals. The underlying complexity of wildfires gets boiled down to whatever narrative best serves those in power or those who want to become powerful. And the media often serves as the megaphone for all of it.
All of this makes me think, what's driving the media to pick some narratives over others? Is it just politics, or are there other pressures behind the scenes?
It's a mix. Greek media is in a tough spot. Low public trust, shrinking revenue, and a handful of powerful owners with close ties to politicians. These relationships mean news outlets sometimes act less like watchdogs and more like government mouthpieces, especially when their funding or future is on the line.
So, newsrooms might quote politicians more, push certain stories, or avoid rocking the boat too much. That sounds like it could really limit the diversity of perspectives during something as critical as a wildfire.
Exactly, and that's what the research found. Almost half of direct quotes in wildfire coverage came from government officials. Ordinary citizens or independent experts got much less airtime. Plus, financial dependence on government support or big business makes it even harder for journalists to challenge the official line or explore complex, uncomfortable truths.
It's a bit grim, isn't it? But maybe understanding these dynamics is the first step toward more honest, inclusive coverage. Which brings me to one last question. What does the study suggest for the future?
Honestly, the big takeaway is that we need to step back from oversimplified blame. Wildfires are complex climate, policy, economics, and social inequalities all collide. Blame games, especially against vulnerable groups like migrants, only deepen divisions and distract from systemic fixes.
So, what would a more constructive approach look like? Is it about better journalism, stronger policies, or something else?
A bit of everything. News media have a responsibility to explore the real roots of these disasters, not just echo political talking points. And governments need to own up to the complex causes, investing in prevention, resilience, and fair policies. Crucially, giving a voice to marginalized communities, those directly affected by wildfires, can lead to fairer, more effective solutions.
That's a hopeful note to end on. If anything, the Evros wildfire shows the dangers of narrowing a tragedy down to a scapegoat when what's really needed is open dialogue and genuine action. Thanks so much for breaking this down with me.